When I look at our history, I realize that our history is not negotiable. It's not defined by slavery. It is a profound history, and we need to teach it in honesty. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to the Erudition Network. I am Eddie Phillips. This is the Erudition Network Interactive Black History and Knowledge session. We will be on here for the next hour talking about history and informing. Unlike a lot of times before, what I'm not going to do, and because I've heard your feedback, a lot of people are like, hey, man, we just want you to get to the topic. What you don't realize is a lot of that is my nervousness. I'm talking to try to meet people and make sure I'm not forgetting anybody. But I do agree. I think that it is important to get right to the subject and do what we need to do. So tonight we're going to talk about some things that are really, really sensitive, but have a history. And we're going to delve into it, even though it's a difficult topic. It's an incredibly important topic and something that we need to talk about. Rather you come on and watch the replay, because I know it's a little late tonight, or you come into the interactive, I want you to bring your thoughts to this and drop it in our comments, as many of you do. And I try my best to answer your comments. But we want to talk about the not so hidden history of racism in the medical field. This is the history of doctors and policies and practices that have harmed people of color. Black Americans suffer from it honestly, from the time in which they're born. And the history of it affects our trust, how we interact with the world. And I want to take a historical journey tonight on this program and also touch on some of the things that we've seen lately that kind of inspired me to go ahead and do this particular episode, telling the stories in a way that you can really understand them in a narrative way that is not as boring as people try to make history to be. Before we start, let me ask you a question, because I said last week I wanted to start doing that. How many of you heard of the Tuskegee Syphilis Study or syphilis experiment? Many of you may have heard something of it and may have a slight understanding of history. And I'm sure a few of you have, just for the people in the South. But there will always be people who don't know. And that's what we want to talk about. And it's not their fault, because much of the history hasn't really been taught factually or fully. Actually, another question. How many of you know the name Henrietta Lacks and why she is important? Many people, when you ask that question, may talk about the movie with Oprah Winfrey, right? And that will give you some recognition, but it's not as much as the recognition as is deserved, as is required. I see one of you guys sent us a thing. If I don't see your comments in here, because Facebook's doing weird things, please let me know that you dropped it in Facebook by coming over to YouTube YouTube is usually the best. It lets us see it, but I don't know why Facebook continues to do that. And it's a little bit annoying, and I don't always see you all's comments, and that makes me mad. I try to keep my phone somewhat here to see. Oh, okay, I see. My friend Fahim, my brother, good to see you. But Henrietta Lacks, getting back to the lesson, and her cells, we'll touch on a lot more coming up, but she's one of the most important medical history finds and studies in the world. And yet at the same time, the using of her cells, they were stolen. And for decades, her family didn't know. What about Anarcha, Lucy, and Betsy, the so-called mothers of gynecology? I'm guessing none of you know about that. Yet their story, again, is important and often not studied and often not mentioned. And that's why we're here. We want to try to uncover these lessons, these people, these things, and talk about how important they are for medical science, but also how, despite the use of Black people's cells and genius, that we are still abused in present day and the issues that we see. Now, we'll start with the current times, and we'll touch on slavery and pseudoscience and some doctors who used it to justify their practices. We'll talk about men like J. Marion Sims, who is also called the father of gynecology for his surgical breakthroughs, but the methods that he used and how he mistreated people of color. We'll discuss the myths and the notions, and the Black people feel less pain, that because they are beasts, it doesn't matter what you do, it's not really hurting them. And see how these false beliefs, going kind of back to what we talked about last week, still echo today. And then we'll touch on other things like the Flexner report of 1910 that shut down Black medical schools and tried to condemn Black medical science and reduce the amount of doctors in the Black community for decades. And many of us don't know about that. We'll confront the experiments, as I said, with the Tuskegee study and things like that. We'll talk about American eugenics and how that program also played into the pseudoscience and how people were treated. But before we start, I'm going to give you a couple of videos, which I don't typically do, but I want them to introduce certain points. These videos will show examples and testimonies and people and relate to what we're discussing. I will make them very brief. They will not be the full videos or the full thing, but I want you to understand how important this is. I'll be showing them simply so that we can go into this narrative informed. So get you a notebook, which is I always ask you guys to do. Get comfortable. Let's get into this episode. And our goal is to inform, to get you to start thinking as a primer. And by the end, I hope that you are enlightened, maybe a little bit outraged, but inspired to go and do your own research and study. Because this is heavy stuff. This is serious stuff. But I'm going to strive to keep you engaged by talking about it, interacting with you, and keeping it moving. All right? So let's first look at some of these videos, because I want you to see this before we get into the other issues. The first video that I'm going to show you came out the other day. It is not the full video, and I will advise you again, to some it is triggering. It triggered me. But it is an example of the carelessness that is often faced by many of us when we are in situations, I don't know why I did that, in situations with medical people. Here we go. This young woman was in labor. The woman the nurse that was actually supposed to triage and get her in, I mean, I'm sure many of you have seen it. This is a current, real world, real time example of what a lot of Black people face. The thing is, though, Blacks who have sickle cell anemia, Blacks who are facing diabetes issues, Blacks who have high blood pressure, Blacks who have a whole cacophony of different issues have testified to how they have been treated wrongly. Fannie Lou Hamer talked about the Southern appendectomy, in which they would go in and say that they were going to do an appendectomy or do some minor surgery and sterilize Black women. The idea of being treated fairly is still an issue in the Black community today. Here's another video of Dr. talking.
Marion can lead to alterations and disability in terms of pain in the lower extremities, and can lead to ulcers and non-healing wounds, and ultimately these patients present at a late stage to the hospital setting, where an amputation first strategy is what's offered to these patients, in spite of the fact that we've had advancements in medical technology, in device technology, in the technical competencies of physicians that are out there who are doing procedures to save those patients' limbs.
He's talking about in Mississippi how doctors were doing amputations on Blacks unjustifiably, taking limbs from Black people and handicapping them. And this doctor's effort to stop unnecessary amputations, where over 50% of the patients who were Black were put into these situations and said, oh, you have this situation, so we're going to amputate a limb. This happens in diabetes cases with Blacks, where doctors are using improper procedures and things and rushing them to get and have limbs and things move when there are other options and other things, other pre-options too. People saying that they're not getting quality care. This is today. Here's another one.
Behind bars after, in some instances, newborn Black babies were found with serious injuries, broken bones. Enrico Doctors Hospital says staff found 3 babies with, quote, unexplainable fractures. 26-year-old Aaron Strothman is charged with malicious wounding and felony child abuse. My next guest is Dr. Donna.
We have nurses who have been found throughout, and this is just one case, recent case, in which they are doing things to predominantly minority babies. And looking at our fetal rates of death, they are higher, 3 times higher than whites. These are real issues. Here's the last video.
I was in so much pain from my neck. My neck hurt so bad. I was crushed. You made me feel like I was a drug addict. And you knew I was a physician. You have to show proof that you have something wrong with you in order for you to get the medicine. I put forward and I maintained if I was white, I wouldn't have to go through that.
This was a woman, Dr. Moore was a doctor who passed away during the COVID epidemic. And from her own testimony in her own bed to before she died, to inform us, even as a doctor, that she wasn't listened to by doctors and medical staff to show that she had any worth. Any worth. And you have to beg them, as she said, and give reason for them to give you medicine and to treat you humanely. These are real incidents with real significant issues that are still affecting us today. And unfortunately, many of us, right, we don't talk about what we deal with in these hospitals, in these situations. And as a result, a lot of this stuff goes undercover, even though in our community, we know what it is. We ask, why do Black men not trust going to the hospital? We ask, why is it that Black women, they call her an angry Black woman when she challenges the nurse or the doctor when they feel something is being done that's not correct. And so these are real issues. Last video.
Began in 1932 using Black sharecroppers without their knowledge. The men were diagnosed with syphilis and were not given treatment to see how sick they would get. And the case of Henrietta Lacks, an African-American woman whose cancer cells were collected in 1951 without her consent or payment. Her cancer cells to this day are one of the most important sources of medical research data. The history of medical abuses include unwilling and sometimes undisclosed experimentation, sterilization, grave robbing, and malpractice linked to social Darwinism and eugenics.
That's what we're going to talk about tonight. We can't do that without talking about, hello, Tina, good to see you. Thank you for joining us. Early pseudoscience, which I got a little bit into last week, and how that plays into it on how they use the enslaved. Because these are the foundations of racist medicine and medical practice. To understand how that works and how they became entwined in America, we have to start with slavery. In the 18th and 19th centuries, many white doctors and scientists believed that Blacks were not human. They weren't just going off of a personal prejudice. Chattel slavery and their ability to try to excuse it, they had to come up with a way to dress it up, to put a scientific and medical mark on it. And they provided a lot of false, intellectual, pseudoscience frameworks to justify what they were doing, to make their abuse correct. One example of that is a man named Dr. Samuel A. Cartwright. Write that name down. Samuel A. Cartwright, a physician. He was around in the mid-1800s, and he's infamous for devising something he called Drapetomania. I think I talked about him a little bit last week. Now, Drapetomania was not a real disease. You can go look it up, and now they tell you it was not a real disease. It was a completely fabricated disease to justify what they wanted to do. Cartwright claimed that enslaved people had problems that caused them to run away from captivity. He thought that if an enslaved person tried to escape bondage, to get away from an abusive master, it was because the slave was this. It wasn't because the slave was going through this devastating thing that was inhumane. No, he said that drapetomania was a mental illness that made them run. And his notion or his hypothesis stated and gave evidence to whites, right, that slavery was such a benefit to black people that someone would have to actually be insane to run away from it. Drapetomania should be something that every black person puts in their mental Rolodex. When someone says, slavery wasn't that bad. Oh, so you subscribe to Drapetomania. You subscribe to Samuel Cartwright's insane theory. It may sound crazy to us, some of these things, but back then, these ideas were written in books. They were preached upon in pulpits, and people believed it. The medical associations in southern states presented this stuff as fact. So in the South, they took it seriously. Cartwright became renowned. He gave you what the symptoms were and what to look out for. He gave you cures on how to cure it. And what was the supposed cure? It basically came down to violence. Beat the crap out of them. Enforce your dominance over their subservience. Cartwright wrote that if enslaved people became dissatisfied or slunk in or they talked back, the remedy was whip it out of them. Beat it out of them. He advised slaveholders to hire slave breakers to ensure that black people remain in submissive, knee-bending positions whenever they came into the area. And as I said last week with these myths, he also invoked the Bible to justify this. And if any slave dared to go against it, beat them. Beat them almost to death. Remember, I told you last week that a slave could be killed legally. And you could be forgiven for insurance purposes if they died in the process of discipline. So a doctor said, beat them. He also is important for another fake illness. It has a very weird name, but it's called Dysenteria atypica. Basically, again, he suggested that enslaved people appear lazy or mischievous, right? Or not wanting to do hard work. It was due to the disease of the mind. There was a medical reason why. He claimed that black folks either wanting to run away from or having this laziness, that the sensitivity in their nerves and their stupider or duller mind made it a necessity that you gave them treatment, which I just told you was beating. And if we look at the history of this from a medical doctor, it shows us the racial and violent and evil mentalities that were being developed in a medical field during the time of slavery. It also tells us, because they thought we were duller and stupid, that myth that black people feel less pain, or that they participate in hyperbolic things that to show out in order to be seen. It all makes sense when we go back to Cartwright's theory. Historians will tell you nobody bought into Cartwright's theory. But we know that many did, especially in the South. And that many hired slave breakers and abusers and everything to knock black folks down for their own good to treat them. Question for you. Can you imagine right now a doctor who is sworn to be a healer, to take care of people, using medical language to justify beating the crap out of you to heal you? But that's part of our American medical heritage. It's uncomfortable and it's true. And when you look back at the Black woman sitting there screaming her head off, and we ignore them, and we pretend that it's histrionics. They're acting out. No, these were not fringe racist behaviors. These weren't fringe racist theories. They seeped into the medical mindset, and they're still there. The fact that people believe that Black people have a higher pain tolerance or less sensitive nerves, which is something that Cartwright promoted in both of his medical theories, and why you have to break them down, doctors still rationalize that when they see Black men, women, or children screaming that they're in pain. This myth of insensitivity contributes to a lot of death, has contributed to a lot of death, hurt, destruction, and harm. Despite what we have tried to do in helping people. I told you guys I wanted to talk to you about the mothers of gynecology. Can anyone, the four people I have in here, have you ever heard of the statement, can you tell me anything about the mothers of gynecology? Many people can. But let's use a name. Dr. J. Marion Sims. Tony Briscoe, good to see you, my brother. Glad you and my wife are here. Dr. J. Marion Sims, write that down. Sims lived in the mid-19th century. He was a peer of Cartwright. And if you go and look his name up, you will see people give him the moniker Father of Modern Gynecology, because he pioneered or created a technique to repair vesicovagal fistula, which was a serious childbirth injury. If you're just reading on that part, Sims is praised as a medical innovator. People talk about how this was so groundbreaking. But recently, historians have started to realize, people have rightly started to question how he made these discoveries. What did he do to uncover how to treat this? Sims' breakthrough came at a horrible cost. He developed his surgery techniques. He went by experimenting on Black women in Alabama around the late 1830s and 1840s. These Black women had no ability to consent, to give consent to him. And because they belonged to slave owners who permitted and gave Sims permission to use these subjects, right? Sims went about his experiment. We know historically about three of these women, Anarcha, Lucy, and Betsy, though there are many, many more enslaved women and girls that he experimented on. Now, I gave you a very technical term. I told you vesicovaginal fistula, the condition that he said he was going to cure, caused incontinence and a lot of pain. And it was common when people had difficult childbirths. And finding a cure was something that people wanted to do. But Sims, not seeing Black women as human and having the same idea that they could have more pain tolerance. I want you to think about that as you think about the young lady that was sitting there screaming. He flagrantly disregarded the well-being of his subjects because they were Black. He performed dozens of surgeries on these women without anesthetic. Let me repeat that. Without anesthetic. In an era where he could have given them anesthesia, he chose not to. He did that because, as he said, partly due to, of course, his racial idea that women and Black people could endure more pain. But in his own writing, he focused on perfecting the technique and considered the pain and the screaming and the unfortunate things that the women went through as educational and necessary. Apologists say he gave these women opioids and stuff after. There's no confirmed facts of that. But what we do know is that he conducted surgery after surgery after surgery on Black women without anesthesia, without any kind of moral required. If you go and I want you to do that and read on these surgeries, and you look at it's devastating. In one case, the woman Lucy underwent a surgery with him that was so painful, it resulted in her having a severe infection that later developed into blood poisoning as it slowly killed her. And Sims, without any care in his records, wrote, well, Lucy almost died from septicemia. And why is that? Because he purposely left a sponge inside of her. Another subject of it, Anarcha, who was a teenager, was subjected to at least 13 of these operations without anesthesia over years. 13 surgeries over years with no anesthesia, screaming in pain, with a disgusting, sadistic doctor who would leave sponges and equipment inside of the women to see what happened. Once in some of the records, someone said that he had her strung up by her knees, and the enslaved women were forced to hold her down because she was trying to get away. This torture. This is torture. And yet he believed she didn't experience pain in real time, and that much of it was hysteria. And once he had perfected his technique, right? And he had put these women through years of torture, that's when he decided he would start operating on white women. This is the medical science. And when I see this young woman screaming, this is the American medical science. This is why we teach this stuff. Not because I want you to have something sensational, but I want you to go look it up and understand why these things happen. He went on to have a celebrated career, to be praised in New York and big cities. He had statues put up about him. But he tortured these women. And they remained silent. And they are the women, right? They are the ones who should be recognized for giving their bodies up to be able to prove or to solve a serious birthing issue. And that's why we call them the mothers of gynecology. Black women, not J. Marion Sims, a sadistic, disgusting surgeon who really used these women as little bit more than just experiments. It goes further. At the end of the Civil War, we try to tell ourselves that things were improving during Reconstruction and that things were getting better and that the Freedmen's Bureau and everything was going to help. However, these efforts were woefully underfunded. They were not given the full benefit as we think they were. And of course, Reconstruction failed. But what we never think about is, what did this mean for healthcare? There were segregated hospitals, segregated medical schools. Black patients were often regulated to poorly funded color sections of hospitals. They were denied admission in white hospitals, and Black physicians faced huge deficits in getting training and medical privileges. Because the main professional organization for doctors at the time, the American Medical Association, AMA, effectively said that Black physicians should not exist. They didn't put out an official rule. It's what they did through policy. They didn't let them join. The AMA pushed them away. And let me tell you something. They never apologized for this. There was a situation in 2008 that they were challenged on this for the systemic exclusion of Black physicians and issued no apology. That tells you something. And when we talk about medical education specifically, because that's a huge part. In 1910, a document called the Flexner Report was published. Does anybody know, write that down, what the Flexner Report was? Most of us don't. But it's important. It's important. It transformed the way we train in medicine in the United States. Abraham Flexner, who was funded by Andrew Carnegie with the support of the AMA, the American Medical Association, he went through all medical schools and recommending closing the vast majority of them. Unfortunately, he wanted to close a lot of Black ones. Among the schools he targeted were 5 out of the 7. Listen to what I'm saying. There were only 7. 5 out of the 7 existing Black medical college. Why? Because Flexner believed Black doctors should be trained only to serve Black patients as sanitarians. Basically, don't treat them to heal them. And he believed they were inferior and, by that definition, unnecessary. So as a result, for over a decade, from 1910 to 1920, all but 2 Black medical schools shut down, closed. Those 2 surviving schools, Howard University and Meharry Medical College, were the only ones that stayed open. And that was because most of those schools were created by white men. And there was a different way of having to deal with that. So that meant that institutions that had produced most of the Black doctors in those previous years were gone. And what does that say about the education of those Black doctors, the quality of it, their ability to get a job? The result is far fewer Black physicians got trained for a 10-year period. And those 5 schools, you would have had, on average, what is estimated to be 30 to 50,000 more Black physicians in the 20th century than we had. And if you were to look at it in another way, right? Black Americans, who were about 10% of the United States population, had only a handful of doctors anyway to serve them for decades. White medical schools and hospitals did not allow them in. So when we look at the 1910s to 1920s, I want you to look back at the Flexner report and what Abraham Flexner and others did. Black physicians were unrepresented in the workforce, and only about 70% of Black medical students are trained in those schools. You took that away. If you think that Howard and Meharry were saviors, they weren't. Because again, there's only so many students that could attend those schools. So there is a structural barrier created in how medicine is given to Black people. In the early 1900s, that meant less people to be there for birthing problems, general health problems. So you're not only dealing with lack of facilities, lack of ability, now you're dealing with lack of training. So when we go back and look at the statistics of that time and we say, wait a minute, black people were dying a lot before integration. Now you know why. In 1906, before any of that, they were already suffering. The New England Medical Report said that Black Americans had the worst survival rates for certain diseases like tuberculosis and others because of the bias in care. They knew it. Flexner did not just create this report out of some randomness. Then when you slap Black codes, Jim Crow, and everything else on it, people are now not getting health. But even in all of that, we had people like Charles Drew and Daniel Hale Williams and Dr. Montague Cobb who pioneered plasma in the case of Dr. Drew. And his knowledge and understanding of that changed the world during the World War. At the time in which most of our doctors were not being trained. Why is that? Well, we have to also add another part in there, eugenics. Eugenics. During that time, eugenics was huge because it had medical and racial components to it. I talked to you all a little bit last week about eugenics being a pseudoscientific idea that sought to show that society needed to encourage the production of good genes and keep the bad genes out. And this went from just being Black people, indigenous, to even certain whites. In the U.S., eugenics was so popular that they used to have state fairs where you could go into a eugenics booth and have your blood tested, and they would parade you out as a eugenic hero, or they would show you to be unfit, and the society, the people in your town could ostracize you. These are historical facts. Go look that up. We keep saying these things. A lot of historians, oh, these are fringe theories. No, they weren't fringe theories in the late 1800s, and they weren't fringe theories in the early 1900s. Doctors acted upon these things. By the 1935, we had 30 states that had passed laws allowing involuntary sterilization. regardless of race, based on eugenic ideas. The Germans going into World War II believed in eugenics and euthanasia. This is real. Telling people that they have mental health issues, chronic physiological issues. This happened. Tony Briscoe. I have in my arsenal to read Medical Apartheid, A Dark History of Medical Experimentation on Black People in Colonial Times to Present. Great book by Henrietta Washington. I think I have that in my library too. It is a great book. We can look at a lot of things and see how they kind of led to it, but eugenics is a huge part. One of the things that changed in 1927, the Supreme Court took a case called Buck versus Bill. The court had upheld the Virginia sterilization law. And the Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes declared 3 generations of imbeciles are enough. That essentially endorsed the idea that the state could sterilize a woman or a man who was deemed feeble-minded to prevent them from having children. And this green light other states to do it, and they did it. If you go look up the woman, Carrie Buck, her mother saying that she shouldn't have kids, the precedent was set. For sterilization, if you can do it to whites, you definitely going to do it to blacks. And this was real. It's not uncommon in American history for black people who went in for procedure, routine procedure, and to wake up and have other things going on and to be sterilized. To be sterilized. This, of course, is, you saw some cases of it before integration. Even when there was segregation, where they would take these people in and they would do these things. But definitely after integration. We talk about abortion, but thousands of women of color were sterilized in the States. It was so common that they gave a name to it. The Mississippi Appendectomy. That's the euphemism that they gave to it. Being the fact that a woman could go in for an appendectomy or a minor surgery, and the surgeon will remove her uterus while they was at it and not tell her. Fannie Lou Hamer famously told that story, being a victim of that. She said that in 1961, she went in for the hospital to have a small tumor removed. And without her consent, the doctor took her entire uterus out, gave her hysterectomy, and sterilized her. And she didn't find out till afterwards that she couldn't bear any children. This was real. And when she started talking about and speaking out about the abuse, she soon found out it wasn't just her. In fact, the studies at the time showed that 3 out of 5 black women in her county, in Sunflower, Mississippi, had undergone the same sterilization as some by the same doctor. 3 out of 5. 60% of those people in that county, women in that county, being treated and being given an unasked for surgery, medical malpractice. But that's what it was. And it wasn't just isolated to Mississippi. I went through and I looked. In North Carolina, they had an aggressive eugenics program. About 7,600 people were involuntarily sterilized between 1929 and 1975. Did you hear what I just said? I was born in 1973. 7,600 people were involuntarily sterilized. And before you say, well, that could just be white, 5,000 of them was black. North Carolina even had a eugenics board long after eugenics was shown to be false, that could order sterilization for feeble-minded people, or if a caseworker or somebody judged you to be slow. And let me tell y'all something. Some of these laws, like that one, stayed on the book until just the turn of the 2000s. Famously, Puerto Rico, the U.S.-led population of Puerto Rico, they had a population control experiment that they performed on them. And that resulted in, and many Puerto Rican women still talk about it. That resulted in 1/3 of Puerto Rican women being sterilized from the 1930s to the 1970s. They tried to say it was voluntary, but a lot of them didn't understand the language or didn't understand what they were doing. And so they gave them something what they call the operation to limit how many people was going to be on that island. Native American women, it showed that 25 to 42% of all Native American women of childbearing age were sterilized by the Indian Health Service in the early 1970s. And when we see the Native Americans activists in the 70s rebelling and going out, and people say, well, why were they doing that? Because 2 out of 5 young Native women were sterilized. When we said eugenics and this racism didn't exist anymore. In California, in the prison system, from 2006 to 2010, we found that 148 female inmates were sterilized without proper consent, or they were coerced to want to be sterilized. And it shows that it didn't stop in the 70s, it didn't stop in the 80s, and it is still with us today. Recently, the administration said they were going to stop aligning themselves with the Southern Poverty Law Center. You know, in 1973, there was a study done by them that showed 100,000 to 200,000 low-income people were being sterilized annually through federal programs. Many of these people were in the South, and a lot of them were teenagers who had gotten in trouble. One case particularly, the Ralph sisters in Alabama, 2 black girls around 12 and 14, they were sterilized without their mother even knowing it. Ralph sisters, go look it up. It's not random, it's systemic. There are reasons why there's a low value put on Black lives. Family planning services and population research shows there's a low value, even when we go into a lot of these doctors' offices. This is what it is. And yet, we sit here on a lot of occasions and we don't really focus on it. I'm not going to get through all of it tonight, but I just wanted you to understand. I sat down with my family today. The reason why we got into this is because I wanted to know how many people were aware. And I went in and I tried to pull up the peer-reviewed studies and all of this stuff to show, which is what we do, what the mortality rates when Black folks have Black doctors compared to having white doctors and staff. And you may say, well, that could be kind of bigoted. That's wrong. We shouldn't look at it that way. But I'm going to be really honest with you. It's not wrong because we're still seeing it. When Black people have Black doctors, historically, they live longer. They receive better treatment, better empathy. They avoid preventable health issues that could lead to death. And they stay more healthier. That's not an opinion. That has actually been studied by Stanford University, right? By University of Pennsylvania, by Johns Hopkins, by the American Heart Association. It's a fact. And why is that? When Stanford did this study, it found that Black infant mortality was 2 to 3 times higher when babies are cared for by white doctors. When babies are cared for by Black doctors, infant mortality dropped to 60%. And you think about this young woman sitting in this chair screaming while this white woman is ignoring her. Here's the thing. That's the largest mortality drop ever recorded in racial health disparities. And that was in 2020. What does that mean? That means that thousands of Black babies could survive. Thousands of Black mothers could survive every year if they were cared for by people similar to them, who had empathy for them, care for them, didn't go to these old ideas from the past. When we looked at trauma mortality, Black patients treated by white ER doctors had a high mortality rate, especially in areas of diabetes, heart attacks, and strokes. They were more likely to be given medicine and sent home. They were more likely to not be given anything and sent home. But Black patients who were treated by Black ER doctors had a significantly lower mortality rate. Lower risk of premature discharge. They were listened to. Symptoms were found that showed what was actually bothering them. What did that mean? That meant that Black doctors were less likely to ignore symptoms that Black women and men and children talked about, more likely to test and treat to see what is concerning them, to send them home on the right path, less likely to exaggerate or diminish what was going on for them, less likely to say, oh, they're just here to get drugs. Johns Hopkins did a study that said Black patients with Black primary care doctors had a 30% increase in life-saving preventive care, and they lived longer. Black doctors would suggest diabetes checks, cholesterol controls. They would treat them for sickle cell anemia, hypertension treatment, things that they knew that affected Black people. And I'm gonna tell you something. This involves all of us, because this is our families, this is our mothers, this is our sisters, our brothers, our children. They were more likely to tell you that your kid has an allergic reaction and he or she has asthma, which is life-threatening. They were more likely to suggest what you can do to prevent triggers. Black men, this is another thing about that study. It also showed that Black men were more likely to go to the doctor or accept what the doctor said when it was said by a Black doctor that showed empathy, concern, and care and follow-up. all this suggested lower mortality rates. All this suggested that people were better able to be healed and deal with their pain and post-op monitoring. Lastly, when they talked about to black boys, and when black boys had even one black teacher, counselor, pastor, friend while they're young, these are actual statistics. 40% reduction in high school dropout. 30% reduction in teen depression indicators that could lead to self-harm or suicide. Less likely to go to jail. Why do we have these statistics now? My wife was talking about statistics earlier, because the reality is we now have black medicals, mental health professionals, physical health professionals who actually care and study so that we could be better. There's a reason why a lot of black people did not want to take vaccinations, even though many of them were dying. There's a reason why black men didn't want to go to the doctor. There's a reason why they want to cut your health care, why they want to limit your health care. I gave you a little bit tonight, a little bit, but it's enough because I wanted you to understand the history of this, why it is so important that we know this history, that we know these studies, that we know what's been going on. Too many of us have been lost. Too many of us have been lost. Thank you, Tony. I appreciate you, brother. I was on a little late tonight, but I appreciate you joining us. Representation matters, ladies and gentlemen. Patient advocacy matters. Changing these systems matter. We have to be mindful and push and push and push. I invite you, those who watch this later, when you go, I want you to share. I want you to think about something. One thing that you've taken away from today's episode, share with us if you've dealt with medical discrimination and what that was like and what you had to go through. Share with us if you have resources or organizations that people can turn to when they go through these things. Drop them in our YouTube chat, and I guarantee you will help us and help others. Before I get out of here, I want to thank all of you all, but I want you to start going over to our, I'm going to try to share the screen, to our school site here. We have opened up a new, I opened up a new school site for us so that people have a better ability. I'm going to try to share my screen with you all. Give me a moment before I get off of here. To better interact with us. One of the things about teaching history is that a lot of times it can be frustrating when I feel like I've given you a topic, but it's not something that you're really, it may be new. This site allows me to go on and to actually provide, I don't know why it's jumping through all the screens. There you go. Provide you all the ability to go in and actually do some schoolwork, some classwork. And I like that. I like the fact that you can go, this was our last, we will do this with this episode, the last episode, where you can go in, you can click the video, watch the video, then you can actually go on and take a 10, 15, 20 question quiz to reinforce what it is that you learned. Reinforce what it is that you learned. We want to start putting on PDFs and different things over here for homeschoolers, teachers, folks who want to teach Black history, don't really know where to start, and provide you with an avenue to do that. Now, later on, we will start providing courses, but these will be paid courses, right? But we'll try to keep it reasonable, but things where you can actually engage and learn more, other than just doing the interactive during the week where I get on with you for an hour. These will be laid out courses on early world Black history, on what we went through medieval times, on post slavery, all of these different courses to inform you and to grow you. So that's a new site for us. I'm really happy about it, that we can utilize and grow and get everybody up and running. Go on there, go to school.com, look for the Erudition Network, become a member of it, link to it, and I guarantee you will grow from it. All right, I wanted to put that out there before I got on here tonight. But I want to thank you again, all of you all that join us, and ask that you support us, the Erudition Network. Please subscribe on YouTube. If you want to help us with a Cash App, that's the Erudition Network. You see it scrolling at the bottom of the screen. Please engage in your history. Take it seriously. Share. Get people to engage. History is important because it, as you may have learned tonight, there are things that will inform you. We will have the quiz up for this episode and the video on school tomorrow. So you will be able to go on there and answer the questions and kind of reemphasize those names I told you to write down tonight. All right. I'm going to get out of here, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a joy to be with you tonight. You all be blessed. You'll see at the end of this video as a tagline for my last book. Please go on Amazon and go get that. But until the next time, you all be blessed, and we will be seeing you. Thank you for joining me tonight. Have a good one.
From Eddie K. Phillips, founder of the Erudition Network, comes 101 Black History Questions, a groundbreaking book that challenges what you thought you knew and uncovers the stories history tried to hide. Perfect for classrooms, families, and curious minds. Get the digital copy today on Amazon.